Sunday study that we've been conducting. As most of us probably understand by now, that despite the fact that we're using various platforms to participate in the study, the base from which we are addressing everyone is Black Power BPU, Black Power 96.3. That is the FM radio station that has been acquired and is up and running, established by the African People's Education and Defense Fund. And WBPU, Black Power 96, is currently engaged also in a fundraising drive, because it is a community-based, people-based FM radio station that requires support from the public for its success. And we are extraordinarily appreciative of the fact that we have WBPU as a platform for taking this study forward. There's also an app, Black Power 96 app, that is available so that we can stream to your phones. That's both using Apple devices as well as Android. So please don't hesitate to get those devices, so that when you're not able to listen directly by radio or through your computer, you can have access to Black Power 96 via your phone. As I mentioned, this is, we just did a great launch celebration of Black Power 96 on yesterday in St. Petersburg, Florida. Uhuru. The sound is bad? Low? It's low. Let's see if we can do anything to enhance that. Is that the maximum? Is the sound any better now? Is it still low? There's no improvement? It's still low. Uhuru.
I don't know if everybody is experiencing that same thing here.
I see.
That's pretty real clear.
You hear me clearly? Okay, so it's London that's having a problem hearing me. So there's nothing I can do on this device. That's what I was trying to determine, whether it was something on this device that made the sound low. So it may be something on the London side. Forcia, Makta, can you unmute and give me a sense of how you're hearing me? Okay. So it may be the London device. But I am going.
I'm having trouble hearing you, like not when you're speaking, but and then your sentences that cuts out a little bit. I don't know if that's.
I see. It seems like we may be talking about different things. You're gonna have to bear with me. I don't know how to move beyond what we have here. I guess the people who are responsible for the broadcasting on this end should investigate and see what it is that makes it not as reliable as it should be for everybody. But I am going to ask again, if unless there is some kind of emergency, unless I cut out entirely, and that it's not possible to understand me, I'm going to ask that you mute your phones. But there are other platforms also that, if it's too low, you might want to use to participate in the study. Somebody needs to help me. Is that that's Black Power 96 YouTube page.
And it's also
and it's also live on Facebook. So these are two platforms, two other platforms you may use if you are not hearing clearly via the landline. I do want to again restate the fact that we are utilizing WBPU, BPU Black Power 96 FM radio station as the primary platform here, and that on yesterday WBPU had formal launch celebration. Had a lot of people who came out, especially a lot of young African people, and not some old, some young. One brother who was the grandson of an African man who made phenomenal economic contributions to the development of the African community here in St. Petersburg, Florida, gave the city the land that established one of the first housing projects in the United States, maybe the first housing project in the United States, gave the city the land so that African people could have housing here, is responsible for having established a transportation system, bus system that offered the first transportation that was available to African people from St. Petersburg to Tampa, Florida, was responsible for providing the land that established the first Black hospital in this city and the first dance hall in this city. And when the city went broke during the Depression in 1929, loaned the city the money to keep it afloat. So his grandson was one of the persons who was here on yesterday. The man's name was Elder Jordan, and as well as another African who was pioneer in his own way in terms of economics, Dan Davis, and Nyabinga Zimbabwe, who we give a lot of credit to the establishing of our broadcast capacity. He is the one who initiated the Uhuru Radio online broadcast and was just an incredible force as the leader of the Agitprop department of the African People's Socialist Party. These were among the people and just a whole lot of other young people. So we had a formal launching on yesterday. And it was also intended to help with fundraising to keep Black Power 96.3 afloat as an instrument of our community. And today I'm going to be calling on people to make contributions, donations to this show, to the radio through this show. Because all of the programmers are going to have a responsibility of seeking financial support for their shows to keep that would support the entire Black Power, Uhuru, WBPU, and to keep the radio station itself afloat and the different programs on the station afloat. So what I'm on yesterday at the launching, I made a pledge for $100, and I'm going to donate that $100 to this show and pay that on today. And I'm asking other people. There's 100 for those of who are checking on Facebook and YouTube and all these other platforms through which you can see us. I'm doing that today, and I'm going to be calling on other people to also make contributions to the show. And hopefully someone smarter than I will provide information about how you do that and how you can indicate that the money has been sent. And if possible, what we'll do is announce before the show is over the contributions that have been made and if possible, who made them if you want that known. And if possible, a short statement that you might want to make about the contribution. So I want to thank you, everybody, for coming on. And we're still looking at the political report to the third plenary that our party did subsequent to our Congress. Our Congress was held here in St. Petersburg, Florida in 2013. And every year since then, we have had a plenary. And the plenary gives us an opportunity to sum up how we're carrying out the work and the resolutions that came out of our Congress, and gives us an opportunity to project the future from this point, subsequent to our last Congress. This is extremely important because it allows the membership of the party, the members of the overall Uhuru movement, and the people at large an opportunity to see whether or not we have been loyal to what the Congress indicated we're supposed to do. The Congress is the highest organization, the highest part of the structure of the African People's Socialist Party. It's that time where the leadership of the party is turned over to the membership, and where the membership elects the leadership, where resolutions are passed, where people adopt the general direction of the party that's characterized as a political report. So there's a political report to that Congress, and elections are held, resolutions are passed, and this process, such as the plenary, gives us an opportunity to see whether we've been loyal to what the membership of the party has voted on us to carry out, and that we are doing the work as opposed to simply treading water and acting like things are happening that are not happening. It's a way that we guarantee that we do actual work, that things happen. So I'm going to start off with the political report. We've been looking at it, and I'm on page 24, and I'm starting on page 24, near the bottom of the page, under a subhead that reads Annual, which is the African National Women's Organization, carries out our commitment to African women. That's the subhead. And the African National Women's Organization Annual is a major development within the party's organization and must be added to the list of constituent organizations to be rapidly developed according to party organizational principles consistent with the mandates and resolutions from our 6th Congress. The party's 5th Congress in 2010 actually initiated the discussion of Annual as a response to the oppression of African women and as a tool of the party to bring women into political life, the party and the revolution. An excerpt from the political report to the 5th Congress stated quite simply, and I quote, "Annual could become the powerful home to African women who are constantly under some form of assault by a myriad of contradictions, but peculiar to African women. Annual would provide a mass organization for women who need to confront their oppression and exploitation. It would allow the party to develop a reserve for the revolution through helping women to recognize the universal contradictions confronting our people and our class that are located in the specific contradictions they are confronting as women." And stated simply, that there are all kinds of things that affect African people, the colonized population, and many of these contradictions that we're faced with experienced primarily by women. Women become, in many ways, the target and the instrument through a lot of the exploitation and oppression that occurs. And sometimes it's not always obvious what the origin of these contradictions are. And so what Annual allows us to do, allows the party to do, is to bring women into political life through their experiences as women and how these contradictions affect them as women. And it allows us an opportunity to show how the specific contradictions that they're confronted with in women are part of a general contradiction that African people and African workers are being confronted with as a part of the historical oppression and exploitation of our people. And this means it gives African women an opportunity to join the revolution to supply the kind of leadership to deal with the contradictions that we're confronted with as a whole people. So here also, the issue is the actual consolidation of ANWO is critical. This means that we must crush the liberalism that allows ANWO to have leaders in the organization in name only, but who do not actually carry out the task of leadership necessary for the effective functioning of our organization. This is, while we're speaking here primarily of ANWO, this is one of the contradictions that we are dealing with within the African People's Socialist Party overall. We are materialists, which means that we recognize that matter in the material world is primary, and that it's not good enough to say that I believe this, I believe that, without it somehow being reflected in what we do. That there actually has to be work that we carry out. I mean, that's the basis of our relationship. It's not that we came together because we thought there was going to be a club of likable individuals. We came together because we were drawn to each other through the principles of the organization, through the philosophy, ideology of the organization, and by the fact that we are committed to overturning our oppression. That's why we even have these plenaries, so that we had a Congress and we said, this is what we're going to do. But it's not good enough just to say we're going to do these things. Then what we're going to do has to be reflected in what we do. What we say has to be reflected in what we do. And we have this whole issue also of leadership. And this is a struggle the African People's Socialist Party has been involved in most seriously in the recent period, where there are people who have assumed posts of leadership in name, but the question is whether or not those leaders are actually carrying out the function of leadership, because if they're not, they can undermine the party, because we go along acting like the leadership is happening in these areas, and it's not actually happening. And you can't tell that it's not happening all the time unless you examine exactly concretely what it is that's being done and make a decision that if that leadership is not happening, if it's not real, then we have to move it. Because if you don't move it, you can't see that nothing is happening there. Anyway, my point is that this whole question of leadership is something that we're dealing with throughout the party, not just when we look at the issue of ANWO. We have been criticizing the ANWO work for some time now. This is because the time is ripe, and we see women participating in political work throughout the world. However, they do not have the advantage of African internationalism and often fall prey to opportunism, especially petty bourgeois feminism. And that's just one of the ways that African women can fall prey to opportunism, because as quietly as it's kept, when many people celebrate Ferguson on August 9, 2014, and the masses of people, how our people rose up in resistance, rebellion against the police, responding to the police murder of 18-year-old Mike Brown, and the fact that they left his body there for 4.5 hours rotting in the August heat on asphalt there. But what is not as widely understood is the role that African women played in that resistance. I'm talking about real resistance. I'm not talking about the hashtag women who you get to see on CNN or some other kinds of venues of, dilettantes. But I'm talking about actually African working class women, African women who were on the barricades, who actually participate in that struggle in a very serious way. We've seen all kinds of evidence of women being in the trenches. So ANWO and African internationalism have the answer. Women don't have to leave the African Revolution to fight for their advancement as women. ANWO can help them to learn this and to throw the full weight of their incredible courage and desire to resist into the camp of African internationalism. This will liberate African women as critical components and leaders of the revolution, to liberate our entire colonized people to their advantage as women. The point here is that it will allow women to participate in the struggle to liberate African people to their advantage as women. Because too often what we've seen in the past is revolutionary organizations talking about the significance of women and women's equality, etc. And then women participate in the struggles, but it doesn't result in necessarily in changing things in a fashion that is to the advantage of women in the process of, as a consequence of the revolution. That's too often not addressed sufficiently, and we're talking about creating ANWR as an instrument through which African leaders, women's leadership can ascend and their participation in the revolutionary process be enhanced, so that the outcome of the revolution will not simply be an outcome that responds to the aspirations and the conditions of African people in just a simple and generalized way, but also in a way that's specific to the interests of African women. Please mute. If you're not talking, please mute. We have to criticize the development of ANWR, however. We need to have an understanding of why we are not bringing more women into this organization, although we see African women worldwide constituting some of the boldest, most committed resistance to imperialism in its many faces. To build ANWR as the mass organization of African women's resistance, we have to be as bold as the women who, without our leadership and the advances of African internationalism, are in the streets and trenches, fighting against the symptoms of our colonial condition. This cannot simply be a debate against the African petty bourgeois feminists who have little, if any, influence in the lives of ordinary African working class women. We must engage in the struggles that African women are confronted with due to the normal functioning of our colonial domination. Otherwise, we end up with a semi-militant African feminist petty bourgeois version of Sex in the City or the Housewives of Atlanta, where the women come together to chat about concerns that are non-consequential in the struggle for the liberation of African women and the conquest of Black state power. Masses of African, and this is what the horrible crime that's committed against African women, in my view, is some philosophy that might come in the form of feminism or something else that will have women mobilized to struggle against contradictions that are confronted by men, leaving out the question of the conquest of state power. Because the colonial state that dominates the life of every African people is still in place. And what we're trying to do is find solutions for contradictions that affect us on a personal level without dealing with the state apparatus that controls the conditions of African people overall. And in fact, is responsible for even how African men view African women and deal with African women. So if we are not engaged in a struggle that, while dealing with all the other stuff in terms of bad treatment by African men, etc., we are not seeing as the primary contradiction and dealing with that, targeting the quest for Black state power, then it's a misdirected kind of struggle. And I think that's treacherous, and I think that's an assault really on the actual real liberation of African women, because African women cannot win freedom from Black men who don't have any. So the solution to the struggle for liberation is to deal with the colonial oppressor that and capitalist exploiter that oppresses and exploits the entire African nation in a way that advances the interests, the concrete and material interests of African women in the construction of the new society that we're fighting for. Masses of African women must be drawn into active political life under organized African internationalist organization. Our weakness in this area limits our remarkable growth in membership
and distorts our development by restricting the quantity and quality of women leaders in the party and the revolution. The development of a dynamic ANWO requires taking on the critical issues confronting African women as working class colonial subjects who are constantly facing the cruel brunt of white nationalist slander. We must be relentless in doing this, as there are literally millions of African women waiting to be recruited into the African Revolution. And I mentioned this question of slander because sometimes it is so ubiquitous, the slander against African women, that it's not even recognized. It's just there all the time. But there's an ongoing assault that occurs in virtually every medium through all kinds of instruments against African women. For example, we've got these 3 girls who were murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, by the United States government, because when we talk about the sheriff, we're talking about the government. These are not just some lone white people who go out and do bad things. They are instruments of the government that we are most in touch with as African people. The police, the sheriff, all of these instruments of state power. And the Sheriff's Department murdered 3 young girls. And they corralled them, pushed them into, when I say 3 young girls, I'm talking about 2 of whom were 15, the other was a 16-year-old child. And they corralled them while they were driving, chased them, and pushed them into a pond and watched them for 5 minutes as the car actually sank. And they did this with at least 17 police officers there, a helicopter there, all the capacities that these people who like to refer to themselves as heroes and the government and media refer to as heroes all the time. They had all of the resources necessary to rescue those girls, but they didn't even try. And not only did they not try, the explanation that they gave for killing the girls was that the girls were bad children and had a bad mama that was responsible for what happened to them. And subsequent to that, they have leaked various kinds of suggestions of these 3 girls, 15 and 16 years old, may have been involved in misbehaving because there was some 30-some-odd-year-old man whose car, after the fact, after they had murdered them, the police came up with a statement saying that they had stolen a car. When the fact is that they weren't chasing the girls for any stolen car. They claimed that they were following the girls because their headlights were not on, but that was a lie, as was proved by the video cameras that was in the police cars and the sheriff's cars itself. And then they fall back on the slander. Well, initially, it's a slander that was directed against African people in general, because the sheriff comes out and says they were in a stolen car, and that the vast majority of stolen cars in this county are done by young Black people from the African community. And so now the girls become criminals, the mother becomes a criminal, the leaked assumption that the girls were up to mischief, some kind of mischief, because they were with the man, etc. And these are 15 and 16-year-old, 2 15-year-old and 16-year-old girls. So the girls become demons who, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the slander. And they are accused of they are made responsible for their own death by the police department. And guess what? There are preachers and other good Black people who accept this definition of who the girls are. And this, of course, when the sheriff and the media say that they were bad girls with bad parents, they say it's obvious to white people, but they're also making this a point that they assume African people, there are enough African people unite with this slander so that they don't have to be confronted with the United African Community trying to deal with this. I think this question of the slander of African women is something that we have to really be conscious of and constantly trying to deal with. So we say that and I don't know what we're gonna be fighting this case around these 3 girls, but this assault on African women in this fashion, again, I mean, historically, you have to be old enough to remember this at a time where white prudish sensibilities would prohibit seeing anything approximating a naked white woman if she wasn't selling a car for somebody. You could find magazines all the time that showed African women in states of undress. You know, they would use African women on the continent of Africa, breasts out, and all of this kind of stuff. And this was a statement that fed into the whole concept that African women were without the kind of morality that should be respected by civilized people. And the African woman has been put forth as this sexual, not just sexual, but super sexual human being without any kinds of moral prohibitions or restrictions, that's inhibitions that would prevent her from committing any kind of offense. She's just been put forth as this horrible human being. And that means also the explanation, that is the explanation for white men raping and committing all kinds of offenses against black women, because black women like that. And what I'm saying is that this is a horrible kind of slander that we have to really be conscious of and have to be confronting. And that's what I think one of the things about ANWO and the party. ANWO must hold mass conferences and its national convention annually. There must be a national convention, annual convention of ANWO. And this will help to define the collective work of the organization. This will allow for African women to come together and struggle around this question. So it's not just some headquarters someplace that's trying to make stuff happen, but there's a constant relationship with African women who we're pulling together in some process that allows us to give leadership and to sum up with African women. So the annual convention and conferences are really important. Annual conferences would give us the opportunity to bring in many women who are fighting official government child theft, the growth of the female African prison population, changes in government housing policies that force African women, already shamed, brutalized, and demoralized by the system, to have to move farther away from family and community in order to receive government assistance. There's a lot of counterinsurgency activity against our people that's carried out through assaults on African women. And I don't know how many people who are in this study can remember or familiar with the horrible assault on African women. But let's take Haiti as one glaring example, where they've even had so-called church missionaries who were kidnapping African girls and children, clearly drawing them into some kind of sexual slavery thing. And I think even the Clinton Foundation was found to have been connected to some of that. But we've seen situations where once exposed, in fact, the Haitian government, if you want to call it that, on one occasion arrested some of the missionaries for stealing the children. And then after some mysterious couple of days, released them all and released the children, gave them children to them, and they left Haiti without children. We have a situation in the United States, and not just the United States, because we have similar struggles I know about in some places in Europe, but in the United States, where the government constantly takes African children away from their mothers. So-called child services institutions, so child protective institutions are taking children on a regular basis from their mothers, and then sometimes giving them to foster families, and sometimes sticking them in institutions that make a lot of money. But the children are taken from their families, from their mothers, and the families are broken up. This is a regular assault on African women. You don't hear any feminists who are talking about he's not our president marching against Trump. You don't, who we're for Hillary. You don't hear them talking about what's happening to African women. You don't hear even the bourgeois feminists and Negro feminists, the they're not talking about that. They're talking about their interest as a sector of the African petty bourgeoisie and how to advance that. And that does not include dealing with the kinds of horrors that these sisters are going through. Horrors in housing projects, which because of government policies are inhabited primarily by African women and children. Because as a condition for having housing, the women can't have men living there. The children's father cannot live there. This is a situation that African women having to deal with in housing projects that will require that if there's anybody suggested of in the family, even whether they live there or not, having a criminal record or drug record, the family can be evicted. I mean, it's a horrible kind of terror that's inflicted on African women 24 hours a day, just trying to survive. And that's what makes ANWO so important, and it makes it so wrong for us not to be doing everything possible to build this organization so that the interests of African women can be addressed. And that's not the interest, that's not this silly question about patriarchy that you hear coming from the petty bourgeois Negro women who have no, if they had any inkling, any connection with the interests of African women, they'd be in these housing projects trying to push back for what's happening to women there. They'd be dealing with the kinds of issues that people like Kunde Mwavita, whose child was murdered, whose daughter, 16 years old, was murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriff Department here in St. Petersburg. We don't even hear from black petty bourgeois women organizations, feminist organizations. They haven't hooked up and said, what can we do? Because they're fighting against patriarchy, while the government is killing African women and their children and committing all kinds of offenses. So we just want to say that collective meetings of this nature, carefully built for, that is conferences and conventions, carefully built for every year, will allow African women to experience their power as a group. And not only experience their power, but to come together so that they can find out that they can experience the commonality of the contradiction. How many women are there, African women are there out there whose children have been kidnapped by the state, presumably, according to them, for the purpose of rescuing the children from bad parents? These are the same children that the government keeps starving on a regular basis by not allowing resources to come to the parents so that they would pay somebody money. They would pay institutions a lot of money to take the foster child Mass Front in Africa and the U.S. The All African People's Development and Empowerment Project is another exciting organization of our movement. Like ANWO and other organizations and institutions, APDEP provides the party the opportunity to demonstrate the significance of cadre, the forces in whom party's leadership is concentrated and upon whom the party can rely to unreservedly carry out the mission of the party, not only inside the US, but in Africa and elsewhere. And the truth of the matter is, as much as we would want it to be the case, every member of the party does not function as cadre. It's not cadre. Cadre is the backbone of the party. Cadre are those forces who have accepted the will of the party and the program of the party. The success of the party is their own success, their own program, their own will, and the failures of the party. The cadre are those forces in the party who we know that we can put any place and put in charge of any kind of organization, institutions. And those organizations, institutions will be fought for, will be defended, will be advanced, because that's what cadre does. It solves problems. It's not the whining, woe is me kind of force, but it's always finding a way to solve the problem, to advance the interests of the party, the movement, and it recognizes the significance of the project that has been handed to it. So we know it's going to be all right because we just gave this project to cadre. These are people who most often have been trained. They are coming to grips understanding the ideology, the politics, the philosophy. They have accepted the protocols that we've established, the resolutions of the party, the main, the political report to our Congress and to our plenaries. This is their stuff. This is the stuff that they are steeped in and that informs everything that they do. Cadre is a different kind of animal, and you will find sometimes that better cadre who just members of the party than sometimes even leaders of the party. But the point is cadre, that's the critical thing. That's the thing that makes the difference in success or failure. That's the thing that makes me a liar as the leader of the party, or makes me somebody that represents a real force in the world. Just because we got somebody in some place doesn't mean that we've got cadre. It's cadre that makes this party function, that keeps it alive, that drives our institutions, etc. And that wherein we know that this is a force that will die before allowing the failure of the party, or will do something else before allowing the failure of the party. In some ways, APDEP has been one of the party's most popular initiatives. APDEP engages, and the thing about cadre is, that's the significance of cadre is because cadre is that force that can be unleashed and can lead mass work, can show the masses direction, can pull together the kinds of organization that we need and make these organizations run. That's the force that we can feel confident is going to carry out the mission established by the organization, by the committee that they are charged with. That's why we have cadre, so that we can have folk who can be put in these places who will fight to the end for the success of the initiative, of the project, of the campaign, of the committee itself. And that's extremely important. That's the one who makes sure that the spirit gets sold, gets moved, makes sure that political education happens in our ranks on a regular basis. Make sure that what the resolutions and mandates that were put forth in our Congress and in our plenaries fought for on a regular kind of basis. Make sure that our position around the issue of women is something that that is constantly pursued and fought for. The cadre, these are the forces that looks out for the interests of the party, for the revolution, and for the masses of the people through the party and the revolution. In some ways, APDEP has been one of the party's most popular initiatives. APDEP engages in the kind of practical work that makes believers of people who need to see the immediate consequences of their participation. Despite some organizational problems within APDEP that undermine some of the work in Africa, the APDEP front in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where we operated birthing clinics, schools, and agricultural projects has been significant. APDEP played a hands-on role in fighting against the scourge of Ebola in Sierra Leone and started the process of building the Black Arm, our own version of an aid organization that contends with the outsized influence of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. Now much of APDEP's, and these are, let me just say, these are some of the things that APDEP has initiated on some level or another. They are not complete yet, but they are incredibly important initiatives that has to be fought for, and cadre will fight for those. Not only cadre that obviously leads APDEP, but there are other people from our party who function as cadre in APDEP. Will see making these missions successful. Now, much of APDEP projects and programs in Africa and the U.S. work have been put on the back burner, while the organization is consumed with the task of building Zenzele, a consignment shop, and I should say a clothing consignment shop, that would provide an ongoing resource generating entity. And Zenzele was also envisioned as the headquarters of APDEP, where the community could shop and volunteer, and where the organization's national and international projects could be showcased. But this is also one of the things that we constantly try to do. So there's APDEP, the organization, and which has its own capacity, and which builds membership and tries to generate resources to that, but it's also now creating an economic institution. Economic development is a critical question, economic self-reliance for the whole people. And so in APDEP, now we're looking at a clothing consignment store in the form of Zenzele, which can be critical. We should do everything we can to build this institution. And like I said, it's consistent with the recognition of self-reliance and self-determination. Zenzele can be a powerful statement to the African community of what self-determination looks like. APDEP is led by Comrade Sister Aisha Fields, a member of the National Central Committee of our party. Although she has had no experience in operating a business, Aisha was thoroughly trained for over 2 years in the operation of the consignment store by Deputy Chair Onazene Ishatella, and highly skilled and experienced members of her office and successful party institutions. It has taken constant struggle by the Office of the Deputy Chair for Comrade Aisha to take the initiative to carry out the work necessary to make Zenzele successful, despite the fact that the entire process had been carefully laid out for her, and every question and issue was addressed. Zenzele is another tool in the possession of the party through APDEP that must deepen the party's relationship to the masses of our people. It is an instrument through which the party can recruit new members into the ranks of our movement and to the ranks of the party itself. The question of APDEP's success with Zenzele and its projects around the world is still being determined by Comrade Aisha's willingness to lead us beyond an assortment of contradictions that any new project faces. The meaning of the existence of cadre is the capacity of the party to extend its leadership into almost any arena through competent, dedicated comrades who will find the line of march and who will solve the problems of the revolution no matter what obstacles confront us. And so I just want to say a couple of things. Now I want to move forward in this study to look at APSC, the African People's Solidarity Committee. I think this is an important section of the study because probably one that offers more questions in the world at large than any other thing that we do. And we, again, on page 28, the headline, APSC, the party's organization of white solidarity. The African People's Solidarity Committee, the party's cadre organization of predominantly white people working under our direct leadership, is also facing a major challenge. Key leaders of APSC are not available to take on APSC work directly because they have been temporarily assigned to work in some of the party's institutions and economic work, something the growing party membership is allowing us to diminish and eliminate. Well, that's not exactly accurate statement that I'm responsible for making here, because the fact is that the work of the APSC is what I determine it to be at any given moment. And sometimes, coming from the last period, a lot of that work was connected to some of the economic institutions of the party. We're in the process of changing that now. I think it was a misstatement to say that that they're not available to take on the APSC work direct, because that is APSC work. But due to the rapid growth of the party and the deepening crisis of white society, APSC mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, has also grown exponentially, giving USM, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the appearance of being the determinant factor in our solidarity work. And the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, if we drew an analogy, we would say that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is to APSC under the party's leadership what NPDUM is under the party's leadership. NPDUM, as we will see, is a leading party organization, and the same thing is a mass organization of the party. And USM is the mass organization of the APSC. And so I just want, that's an analogy. Unless we take this on seriously, we could have the problem of the tail wagging the dog. This contradiction exposes the fact that APSC is confronted with the same issue of organizational consolidation that other committees and organizations face. APSC must develop a comprehensive plan to recruit and develop APSC members from the large pool of USM members. There is no shortcut to solving the problem. That's what it's going to take. We're going to have to see this Uhuru Solidarity Movement and this growth. I mean, and it is growing fast, quickly, not as a problem because they outnumber APSC, but as a potential reserve force from whom APSC can recruit into itself. That's one of the reasons such a mass organization would exist, to provide, and it allows people to work under the leadership of APSC and the party, to learn how to be under the leadership of APSC and the party. And because, as you know, often when people come directly into our cadre formation, like the party or APSC, often they are not prepared. They think they know what it is and they actually don't know what it is, and that becomes a problem. But what happens is with with USM and with the NPDUM, it gives us an opportunity to bring people into our work under the leadership, and they acquire experience of being in organization, and they can learn, and then they can learn whether they need to have a deeper relationship to APSC, and APSC can learn whether it wants a deeper relationship with them as individuals. It creates the process. This becomes a huge pool of forces from which we recruit members into our cadre organization. But there's no shortcut. That's the point I want to make. And there is really no shortcut. And in doing this, we recognize that everybody who we recruit into the ranks of the party or APSC is really not ready. We know that. We know that everybody's not going to be ready, but we recognize that we bring people in, we give them an opportunity to grow and to do what's possible, and then we learn that either they're going to go beyond our expectations, they're going to do it, or they can't do it, or they won't do it, and then we just keep moving forward. But we don't see this as the fundamental crisis. The crisis is when we don't even have a pool from which we can recruit people into our organizations. So unless we take this on seriously, we talk about the tail wagging the dog. This contradiction exposes the fact that APSC is confronted with the same issue of organization consolidation that other committees and organizations face. APSC must develop a comprehensive plan to recruit and develop APSC members from the large pool of USM members. There is no shortcut to solving the problem. We need to bring in the members in order to hold APSC to the task of organizational consolidation according to the established protocols and organizational principles of every other party organization. The problem we have recently encountered within APSC revolve around the need for APSC to function as designed as a cadre organization of the African People's Socialist Party. The political report to the party's 6th Congress spoke of the work outlined here in the chapter entitled "What is to be Done," and I quote, "In summation, to achieve our party's commitment to advance the African revolution that will provide the strategic leadership for the emerging world revolution to overthrow an imperialism in crisis, our sixth Congress must continue party building as our strategic thrust. Our strategic thrust, build the party. Immediately, this will mean developing the existing party committees, organizations, and institutions that now comprise the basic constituent components of our party. So we're saying is that to achieve the party's commitment to advance the African revolution that will provide the strategic leadership for the emerging world revolution, to overthrow imperialism in crisis, our sixth Congress must continue party building as our strategic thrust. Immediately, this will mean developing the existing party committees, organizations, and institutions that comprise the basic constituent components of our party. Namely, this includes APDEP, APSC, NPDUM, Black Star Industries, and the related economic expressions of the party's Office of Economic Development and Finance. For the most part, the structures, plans, and leadership are in place to develop and/or implement this aspect of our party building work. We must simply continue to insist that this work is carried out as mandated under the principles and protocols developed through the One People, One Party, One Destiny campaign. Recruitment strategies must employ the necessary plans for developing the cadre for the success of this work within each of the constituent organizations and committees. So, the question of party building is not some abstract question. Say, well, let's build a party, building the party. It's not just some abstract question. It's not just bringing people into the organization, though that is extremely important. But party building also means that we build these basic constituent components of the party. And because they also open the door for people for membership as well. People join APDEP, people join APSC, people join NPDUM, people join the work to build Black Star Industries, etc. People join NWO. So that becomes part of the party building process. By it does offer up new members from which we can people from which we can pull new members, but it also firms up our organization. It gives us these organizational entities, institutionalizes the party's presence in various sectors of the African population and other places in the world. So it's incredibly important. For the most part, the structures, plans, more succinctly, we must see the rapid recruitment into the Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of APSC as the tool to go fishing into a deeper pool of readily available recruits. The USM forces are the reserve forces that we work to acquire. Now we have to determine what it will take for us to concentrate on transforming as many of these forces as rapidly as possible into APSC cadre. APSC is faced with more than mere organizational contradictions to resolve. The solidarity work is extremely important at this time of imperialist crisis. The majority of the entire colonizer nation is in a state of economic, organizational, and ideological disarray. This is one of the things most obvious by the presidential election, made obvious rather by the presidential election of 2016. We say it again, that the majority of the entire colonizer nation is in a state of economic, organizational, and ideological disarray. That's the truth. And that should be important. I mean, when we're measuring how we're facing this period, it's not enough to say, wow, Trump scares me, or Trump is doing this, or Trump is doing that, and even though that's real. But the greater reality is the whole organizational, political, and ideological disarray of the colonizer nation itself. And that Trump is an expression of that. This is one of the things that was made clear by the 2016 election. We know that there is a deep sense of foreboding within the colonizer nation. There is growing drug addiction. For the first time in generations, if not ever, the death rate of white people is on the uptick. The electoral process has not succeeded in luring them into a sense of control over their future, which appears to be jeopardized by the new norm of economic decline, despite the US government's boast of full employment. And white people get crazy around the economic question. I mean, we've seen it we've seen it. I mean, you know, people wake up and kill the children with hatchets and the wives and everything. The issue of economic crisis and this whole thing we see with drugs, addiction in the white community that's even made drug addiction now a health issue because it's white people who've got it and not a crime question. There is evidence for the first time in recent history, North Americans of the colonizer nation are confronted with the probability that their children will not be as well off as they are, according to a November 2016 report by the McKinsey Global Institute. The white sense of security that accompanied the belief that the US had hegemony over the world's affairs has been shattered by the defiance from forces as diverse as Venezuela, Iran, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Russia, China, etc. I mean, and this has been a part of the whole power of whiteness, and even a part of this ideological success is the sense that what the white world wants, that's the way it's going to be. White world says it, white people say it, that's the way it's going to be. And now, and I think it's been such a force that white people didn't have to be told this. They didn't have to have classes on what white people want is the way it's going to be. They've experienced it. Like people don't have to be told that, you know, if you don't have air, you can't breathe. It's not even something that people think about. Just people just go around unless they have some condition and breathe. And white people have just lived, and they've lived in a fashion that what white power wanted, what white people wanted, that's the way it's going to be. And now they're living in a world where everybody's defying that. Everybody has got the middle finger up, you know, to white people and white power. And this is disconcerting. It's something that white power, white people totally unaccustomed to experiencing. So the election also revealed that the majority of white people in the US, and so white people are unsettled. They're unsettled by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, you know, and therefore, in many ways, capable of listening to the garbage about, you know, the insanity of the Korean regime. They're unsettled by anybody. Anybody can be discredited because they don't want to do what white power and white people want them to do. That in and of itself is enough to discredit the legitimacy of any force out in the world based on how white people view the world and themselves. So if you're African and you don't act like Obama, you don't act like a good Negro, you don't act like somebody who carries out what they want, then that's the basis for trauma and serious kind of contradiction. The election also revealed that the majority of white people of the US appear to be ideologically adrift. The bedrock of ideological coherence has been untethered from the foundation of previous assumptions of permanent affluence and unquestioned US authority. and you know, this sounds like it might be separate from an ideological question, but it's not. If how white people see themselves and the world is based on the fact that white people got more of anything than anybody else, and it's just going to keep on coming, never stop, and based on the assumption that they have authority over the whole world, this is how they see themselves in the world. And if now they can't see a future of permanent affluence, they can't see a future based on them controlling everybody else, that's a profound ideological contradiction. The work of the African People's Solidarity Committee is occurring within this context. That's the context that the work of this committee is happening. And it helps also, hopefully, to show how important the work of the Solidarity Movement is at this time. It is our work. It is the work that can represent a major thrust by the party in our effort to advance our struggle against colonial capitalism. we have the genuine explanations of the material basis of the gloomy forecast for a white existence built and reliant on slavery and colonialism. Let's discover innovative ways to engage the colonizer population in struggle, to see that their future has always been determined by a relationship to Africans and others who have suffered the consequence of white affluence. And this is really important because what we see now is Donald Trump is the current one, but it happens all the time. It happens even when Trump, and it happened under Obama, it happened under everybody else. That the explanation that white people have for discomfort, for things not going well for them economically, has always been it's the immigrants, it's the black people who are living off welfare, it's all these people in other places around the world. And to some extent, it is true, because the reality is the whole foundation of white affluence and success is based on the suppression and oppression of everybody else in the world. Seeing something new, they're just seeing it being flipped. The reality is that they got everything they got because of black people, because of all these other people who are now the immigrants, etc. And so that was acceptable. It was not unacceptable for them to take everything they were taking. Now it's unacceptable because people are trying to take it back. And so that's what I mean in terms of the answers there, that we can engage in this discussion, in this struggle, based on forcing them to have to recognize that that this forecast for gloomy forecast for white existence built and reliant on slavery and colonialism. We have the explanation. The APSC must discover innovative ways to engage the colonizer population in struggle, to see that their future has always been determined by a relationship to Africans and others who have suffered the consequence of white affluence. And we could say of white triumph. The majority of the white people did not believe in the messages of Trump or Clinton, and the popularity of the Bernie Sanders campaign that contended most effectively with the Trump appeal to white people is based on a false assumption that whites can continue to have an affluent underlife of colonial capitalism. I mean, so even that sector who was following, it's not just the Trump people, it's the Bernie Sanders people who were the most enthusiastic participants, a group of white people in this election. So the Trump people have said, well, you know, it's got to do with immigrants, let's build a wall. It's got and talk about how they're going to control African people, and you know, need all these forces, military and other kinds of forces in black communities because of what they like to characterize as black crime, etc. And then you got the Bernie Sanders people who don't say that. They just say they just want more. Yeah, we want to be able to have free education. We want to be able to have free health care. We want to be able to have all of these things. And so they are following Trump, following Sanders. But they can't get more unless they do what Trump is talking about. Because the problems that white people have due to the fact that they have a whole life that is based on being able to expropriate value from black people, brown people, yellow people, and other people all around the world. So no matter who Trump says this is what we have to do, and Bernie Sanders just says that we think we got to make stuff better for white people, but does not say what Trump is saying. The thing is that Trump is the one who says what Bernie Sanders white people would have to do and what the other white people would have to do if they're going to try have any success at all in recapturing the life that white people are accustomed to. And this is an issue that some of the people who call themselves progressives and left and all of this stuff and follow Bernie Sanders and say, wow, you know, Bernie Sanders $15 an hour, where are you going to get it from? Even if he doesn't say he's going to give you $15 an hour first, but he said over a number of years. But where are you going to get it from? Where is it going to come from? I mean, banks don't make money. Stock brokers don't make money, don't make resources. Value is not, value comes from expropriation of labor and resources that they're stealing from someplace else. That's where all the value comes from. And what Trump is saying is that we got to make sure that we can keep getting it from them and do what's necessary and kick the immigrants and all these other people. He says it. Sanders doesn't say it. But both of them, but the reality is that this affluence for white people can only be realized through deepening the exploitation of Africans and other peoples around the world. So, you know, like this, like we say, Bernie Sanders campaign is based on a false assumption that whites can continue to have an affluent life under colonial capitalism. It ain't gonna happen. I ain't gonna let it happen. And other people whose resources are being stolen from them to make America white again, bright again, etc. Whether they're feeling the burn or under the Trump, it ain't gonna happen. And that's what revolutionaries all around the world are saying, that white people will just have to get a job and gonna have to do what everybody else does. And we're not going to have our people exploited more so that white people can get $15 an hour over a number of years. Or so they can have free education. Or so they can have free health care. You have to take the chances just like everybody else. And they're going to have to take their chances without having the access to the resources that comes from Africans and other people. The African people out there, and that's what the APSC is going to have to help them understand. The African People Solidarity Committee is an important party vehicle for exposing this. This is not something that will happen overnight. Whites of the colonizer nation have not simply been waiting for our party to come through with a magic elixir of African internationalism for instant relief, you know, like Alka-Seltzer or something like that. APSC will have to develop and incorporate a strategic approach to this very important task. Also, APSC must initiate the movement for reparations within the population of the moneyed sector of the ruling class. The fact is that millions of white people are in distress. Outcome of the 2016 presidential election. We must offer them all a way forward in defiance of the electoral outcome, of the election outcome, and to the extent possible, also to unity with our understanding of colonialism and reparations. I call on everybody to really explore the significance of the existing crisis of imperialism and how it reflects in the election of Donald Trump and how it is reflected in the response and an unease within a really important sector of the bourgeoisie. I mean, Trump has I think went into office with, how do they call it? Poll favorably is something like 37%, the lowest in history, in recorded history. And today, I think he has something like 38% favorability in terms of polls. You know, so it's not like this guy has won not only the majority of white people, but there's sectors of the bourgeoisie working time, you know, overtime trying to deal with Trump, and some of them are limited in how they can fight him, etc. But our movement, APSC, when we say go into the moneyed sector, it's not necessarily just because they're going to love us and come to their senses and say, wow, you know, I really didn't understand this at all, but because they got problems they got to solve too. And that through our activity, they will find a convergence of interest as far as they are concerned that could contribute to the work that we want to be getting reparations to forward this revolutionary movement. So, the state of the fractures of the body politic of the U.S. can provide us an excellent opportunity to affect the unity of large sectors of the colonizer population with its own ruling class and with the colonial domination of Africans and the oppressed of the world. Opening this front of struggle can only enhance our ability to put revolution back on the agenda within the U.S. and the world. I'm going to go through this next section, but I just cannot overstate the significance of, if we carry out our mission on every front that has been established for us, if we build all these committees and organizations that we have talked about, we'll change the whole political trajectory. of this country, which is what we're fighting for, and why we have to be steadfast. I mean, people come on a regular basis with missions that they would have us go on this mission, go on that mission, based on this thing, that thing that's happening. But I think we've got a good summation up to now, and that's what this process that we are talking about is a stable process. It has taken us from the Congress, where we've put forth a view of what the world is right now, what is the basis of the contradictions in the world, how we have to move to take advantage of the contradictions, what we have to develop organizationally, politically, to make that happen. We've done that, and then we're checking up on ourselves every time. So we are not somebody who's pulled this way and that way because of a new event. We might have to factor how a new event will fit into the overall formula that we're working with, but we are on a good trajectory. Our projection is good, and our organizational are growing better every day, more experienced every day, more competent every day, and our institutionalized presence is becoming more and more institutionalized throughout. So might not be this ambiguous thing that they call a Black Lives Matter movement, whatever the hell that is, but I tell you, you can locate us, and our presence is institutionalized and it's growing more and more Africans are having to come up with a better explanation for reality, and more people in the world are having to come up with a better explanation of reality that does not require jumping over here today, jumping over there tomorrow, and just being tailing events in the world. That's who we are. And so what we do is extremely important, and which is why we have this political report, which is why we study the political report, which is why we are constantly engaged in summing up and moving the revolutionary project forward. And when we say we're moving it forward, you don't know if you're moving forward if you don't have an assessment of where the hell you just came from. You have to have defined the reality, and you define this point of departure and to the place where you're trying to go. But if you didn't come from any place and don't know where you're going, there's no designation to where you're going, then any kind of motion will satisfy you. And that's not who we are. And I'm sorry that some people would be disappointed because we can't do what you want us to do at the moment. But we are trying to make a revolution as opposed to have an event. So I want to try to see how far we can get in this next section, because I think it's really important. And this is, this year, party focuses on African Socialists International. And this is on page 31. And because, some people get us confused all the time because they call us Pan-Africanists. We're not Pan-Africanists. We're not Pan-Africanists. I want to be clear on that. In fact, we are African internationalists. An African internationalist, to say we're an African internationalist is to, it is, of course, a noun, but it's like a verb too, in the sense that an African internationalist is not just something defined in some abstract academic way, but an African internationalist, you will know an African internationalist by what she does, where she's going, what kind of connections, she has, by organized presence in the world to carry out the overall mission. An African internationalist is someone with a mission. And that mission is to be found in the African Socialist International, which is the worldwide organization of Black people, of revolutionaries who are engaged in fighting to liberate and unify African people worldwide. To be an African internationalist is to be somebody in organized motion, in organization, that is to carry out this mission. We are not Pan-Africanists. You can't even find, where is the Pan-Africanist organization? You got a whole bunch of people who call themselves Pan-Africanists who believe a whole assortment of things. African internationalists do not believe an assortment of things. So, the political report to our second plenary in the 6th Congress spoke briefly but eloquently of what was necessary of our African Socialist International work at this time. Throughout the Americas, and I'm quoting, our people also suffer an identity crisis. that stems from a false national consciousness that has no material foundation. We exist in a form of identity purgatory, neither one thing nor the other, all hyphenated identities that never sufficiently explain our poverty and desperate conditions of existence. We are Africans, period. The ASI must wage a major campaign within the African world, a cultural revolution of sorts. We must wage this campaign in a manner that reveals the heroism and critical role of African workers and peasants and the toiling masses. Our cultural revolution must extol the producers, the workers, the creators of all value, and the need for a new society that reinstates the authority of the workers, and especially African women from the producing class, who are central to all production and society itself, unquote. And you know, it's really important because our world, our existence as African people, is something that our oppressors would help us to misidentify. They would steal Africa and cut it up into different pieces that they steal and control. Today, right now, they control it. And one thing that makes them successful in controlling it is because they have carved it up. And they have created this false notion of this being a Ghana. And this, first it was the Gold Coast that we now call Ghana, that this is a Sudan, that this is a Nigeria, it used to be a nigger area, and that this is, just give us all of these names. And so it's easier now that they've got Africans working under the assumption that we are Ghanaians and Sudanese and Somalis and Eritreans and all these other things. They got us working on this assumption, which means they never have to deal with Africa at all. They never have to deal with Africa. They just deal with this handful, this group right over here that has been misidentified and who accepts that identity. And Africans have this problem everywhere in Haiti, throughout the Americas and whatever, but not just there. But we've got people in Australia. I was just, recently looking at the story of how the U.S. went into Hawaii, and just some white business guys got together with the U.S. representative of the U.S. government in Hawaii and had the military, come on shore so that they could overthrow the queen and you should look at the queen. Your cousin, like your mama. I mean, she is a black person. And we've been dispersed all these places and we've been called all these names and we have to take charge of our own identity. This is part of the Cultural Revolution, to free up those Africans, who call themselves the Samoans and all these other names all around the world, and free them up and have them come into contact with our own identity. People who call themselves Black Brits and Afro-Americans and all these other funny names that have been imposed on us by our oppressors, and all of us have in common the reality that we suffer everywhere, exploitation, oppression, and we suffer for the same reason attached to our national identity as Black people. As Black people. White people have defined themselves in relationship to this definition they have imposed on us. So this is the real struggle that we're involved in. So our ASI work has suffered ups and downs. It has not had the benefit of adequate leadership and support from me as its chair or from the party headquartered in the US. We have to do a lot of work. This is because of the escalation of struggle within the US front of the African liberation movement and the advantages it has provided for the party as a whole, depending on our ability to move rapidly to build our political, economic, and organizational capacity. So the situation was given to us that allowed for us to build really quickly here in this place. And in so doing, we have neglected and not paid the kind of attention that needs to be paid to the entire ASI work. Although we are still confronted with the age-old task of creating adequate developed leading cadre, we are in a much better place to build the ASI work than in the past. Historically, the most influential Communist International was built in 1919 through the leadership of the Bolsheviks that had recently come to power in Russia. The Bolsheviks was the Communist Party of Russia, and became the Communist Party of the Soviet Union that led the struggle, seized political power in 1917. That international had the practical and political benefit of Bolshevik state power in Russia. So they initiated in 1919, they initiated what they call the Communist International, and to try and connect all of the sectors, all the fronts of the worldwide communist movement into a single organization. But when the Russians were able to do this because they had state power, and there had been internationals before, but the success of the Communist International, the Third International, was due to the fact that the Russians did have state power. They were able to do a lot. A big contradiction we have always faced in building the African Socialist International is the fact that there is no revolutionary African state that can lend its weight to this project. So unlike the Communist International that had the Russian state that could support it, there's nothing like that for us. In the past, we made efforts to win the governments of Grenada, Libya, and Burkina Faso to participate in this project. A split within the New Deal movement ruling party of Grenada facilitated a U.S. invasion that overthrew the government, imprisoned its surviving leaders, and eliminated Grenada as a venue and the possibility of the New Deal movement as ASI partners or members. Our meeting with Thomas Sankara, leader of the government of Burkina Faso, was non-eventual, mostly because of the lack of unity by the party envoy sent there, who did not effectively carry out the mission of recruiting Sankara to the ASI project. And our attempts to win participation from Libya were frustrated by the Libyan diplomatic representative of the Libyan embassy in London, who demonstrated very little interest in building an international African revolutionary organization. And I would add that was a serious factor, but I would also say that our inexperience probably played a role in that as well. This has meant that the work to build the ASI has fallen squarely on party resources within the US, notwithstanding the splendid work done by party members in other parts of the world. However, we do not have the political and material resources provided by Soviet and Russian state support to members of the Communist International. An example of that support was the $1 million plus annual contributions made to the Communist Party of the US up until December 26, 1991, collapse of the Soviet Union. So the Communist Party of the United States, in this country right here, was receiving at least $1 million a year since around 1919, 1920. $1 million a year was coming straight from the Soviet Union, from the so-called Communist International. In many places in the African world, life itself is problematic. This means that the US and European fronts of the African Revolution, in particular, will carry a heavier load in pulling the ASI together. We will play a critical role in the success of the ASI. This is particularly true of the US front. In the US, we are not only advantageously located because of the high degree of technological development, but also because of the numbers, density, and organized history of resistance of the domestically colonized African population. Moreover, the experience and work of the Hutu movement and African People's Socialist Party that go back more than 50 years provide an advantage that cannot be overstated. In the U.S., we have had the benefit of the many years of work and experience we have acquired, the development of economic institutions, and a differently developed psychology among Africans that has long been open to the idea of Black power and self-determination as compared to our brothers and sisters in Europe. As a community, Africans in the US have been less intoxicated by the notion of the American dream than Africans elsewhere. In his retort to I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X showed that Africans have been living a nightmare. Our work to build the ASI has always been predicated on the assumption that while Africans are individually impoverished, collectively we can utilize our skills and limited resources to build our international party of competent revolutionary cadre necessary unification of Africa and Africans worldwide. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll take off from here moving forward for our next study. But I do want to open it up for discussion and ask people who are with us to engage. Let's engage in discussion, and also in doing so, if possible, and when necessary, for us to go to a particular section, indicate the page number, etc., and we can do that. So I would like to go ahead and open it up. And I also want to say that, again, we would like for people to really demonstrate your desire to have this study as a permanent place, a permanent feature of Black Power 96, of WBPU, to participate in this fundraising drive that we're engaged in right now. And we would like for you to make contributions to this process. So I don't know, is there someone who, how does this happen? If people want to contribute, what do they do?
They unmute themselves if they're speaking, and if they're not speaking, they need to mute.
There's a link that's been provided in the description of where they can go.
But that's where the link where? I mean, everybody's not looking at from the same platform. What should we tell people to do?
It's blackpower96.org/donate.
So you can go to blackpower96.org/donate, blackpower96.org/donate to indicate whether or not you can make your donations. And even during this process right now, you can indicate after unmuting whether or not you want to make any contributions, and you can do this even as we engage in discussions. Now we have a few minutes to talk about the study.
And then we do have Lisa, Lisa, and she can let us know what we receive.
Okay, and we'll let you know what we know in terms of people who are making contributions. So please, I want to open up the phones, open up the lines. Let's go ahead and talk about the study. Uhuru, you have to unmute yourselves if I'm not mistaken, assuming that you are muted. Any discussion, comrades? Is everybody quiet because we said something about money? Or any discussion, comrades? I'm hoping that we still have people on. Uhuru.
I just wanted to appreciate and talk to the instruction and explanations of how the different organizations was excellent, and that would really help the people understand how the different organizations work. So I think it was good. There seems to be a lot of distortion in the phone. I'm not sure if people are dropping off because they couldn't hear part of it.
You couldn't hear part of the study?
Well, I could hear it. But I sent a message that it was sort of distorted.
Weren't we better off without that speaker? Because I don't understand anything he's saying. I don't understand very much of what he's saying. Somebody's saying something, but I can't hear you.
The Facebook, which was clear, but it was definitely a distorted sentence. I don't know if it was coming from Black Power 96 or not, but I know that I had to move because I intervened 2 or 3 times and people should mute, but it never happened. So I just had to move on.
Okay.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
I had the same experience.
I don't understand. I don't understand yet. I don't understand yet what the experience is. What experience am I hearing that people had that was bad?
Something about
It's like an echo. It almost sounds as though that somebody's not muted. So it has a backseat. Like sometimes it was like really
If they're not,
bad.
if they're not speaking, everybody should mute
Just talking about doing this study.
during the study.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm having difficulties even hearing some of what's being said by you. Does this mean that I've gone through this study up to now and nobody knew what the hell I was saying?
The call.
We have other sources to listen to the study. So Facebook was coming through live, so I just kept dropping the call and going on Facebook where it's coming through real clear.
Okay, so now we understand that there was some distortion, some difficulties in, I guess, on the phone line. And I don't know how badly that affected what occurred, but I do want to open it up right now because we're not going to fix that at this moment, I don't guess. I would like to open it up now to see Uhuru.
Yes, Chairman, I don't know if you can hear me, but I do really want to appreciate the political education this morning, and just really appreciate the political report. I think it really helped. I just want to unite with what Tim Rankin was saying, that it really helped to really give us a clear understanding of the different organizations. I especially really like the piece about NWO. We want to join NWO, and I think I unite with, NWO is a tool in the party's hands that every woman of the party really has to make sure that you build NWO. All the different things that you were just laying out with the school system, with our children, and African women's role that they play in the revolution, and historically always played a role in this strange relationship that we have with the state. So I just really want to appreciate that. And can we say, like, how does one join NWO? I really unite with that, and I want to make sure that I join NWO and just really call on all the women of the party or any women out there to really understand exactly what you just laid out, and it's important, beautifully said, and it's our responsibility to win all African women understanding the right side of the question.
Uhuru. Yeah, I think ANWO, that's the African National Women's Organization. There isn't, there's a ANWO a website, isn't there? Isn't there an ANWO website?
Yes.
What is it?
And it's anwohuru.org.
ANWO, ANWO, Uhuru.org. ANWOUhuru.org. Please go there. And I encourage all the sisters to join ANWO as well. Is there anything else about the study?
we have some questions.
Oh, we have some questions online.
Yeah. Good, yes, sir.
Uhuru, Comrade Luezi.
I just say thank you for this
Can you hold for one moment? Hold for one moment, Luezi. Hold for one moment. Why am I getting this? Why? You don't hear this? How this
That's
sounds?
static.
Yeah.
Everyone should mute. Everyone mute except for SG Luezi.
I don't think that's it, but can you please mute if you're not talking? If anyone's not talking, everybody except Luezi, please mute. See if we get it better. Okay, Luezi, can you go ahead? Yeah.
Thank you for this please teaching basically, support as well.
Comrade Louise, hold it, please. Hold it. I'm sorry, Comrade Louise. I can't understand what you're saying. It's not your fault. I think it's something with our system here, because there's a huge amount of static here that makes it impossible for me to understand what it is that you're saying. And that's something that has to be fixed. I don't know.
We're gonna call back in.
I beg your pardon?
We can call back in.
What do you mean we can call? You mean we want everybody?
They're gonna stay on.
Stay on. We're gonna get off and call right back in and see if we can have any improvement. So hold on for a minute, Louise. We come right back to you.
Can you go just read out?
What are you trying to do?
Just read out the number that he dialed.
727.
It's not a 727.
You don't know the number?
Not
So you don't know the number how to call back? Oh boy.
Apparently not.
We don't know they got the damn number?
Yeah, it's
It's
on my
what?
phone. It's on my phone. I don't know about heart.
It's not in the call.
It's not. I don't know what. It's not my phone. He said it's not.
What kind of phone is that? iPhone? You can go to recent, can't you?
I did and it didn't show up.
It didn't show
I
up?
don't know why.
Shit.
So
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconceptcall.com.
That's crazy. I don't believe this shit. This is the most. What? Yeah, this is wow. I'm really disturbed by this.
You entered your input is invalid. If this is correct, please enter your. You entered 81641. If this is correct,
If you don't know the number, what are you doing?
If this is correct, please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. You entered 6651. There are 18 participants in this conference. This conference is being recorded.
Uhuru, Comrade Louise.
Present yourself.
Uhuru, Comrade Louise, can you go ahead and let's see if it makes a difference now that we've called in. It doesn't seem to be have made a difference, but go ahead and please.
Yeah, what was that? I would say it's brilliant teaching and how so like the DHU into what to implement the resolution. I would questions getting from the meeting. Why you organizing? Organize that by ourselves. We got you by ourselves. Hopefully by ourselves. Yeah, what I wasn't being well with that kind of argument. The meeting, this thing, but that means on the church. What we doing to get him? You look at the get the children those two questions.
Okay, it was still very difficult to understand you, but I think the first question says something about why not organize African men. Is that more or less what you were saying, that this concentration on African women, why not organize African men? Did you say something like that?
And the other one,
Is that, and the other one is African women and the church. And are we doing anything to go to the church? I think that's so two things about that. There's a general assumption that whether men want to do it or not, African men, there is a general assumption that African men can join the Revolutionary Project process. There's not much of a question about that. In fact, one of the difficulties that African women most often have in trying to join the movement is their boyfriends and husbands and fathers who would try to prohibit their participation, because there's an assumption that women don't do that kind of stuff. And the problem that we're having is that women who often want to join the Revolutionary Project can't do so because of the attitudes and the ideological assumptions that exist inside many so-called liberation organizations and movements that assume that African women should not function as leaders and also have very backwards attitudes about women. And in fact, if you have male-dominated organizations, what you will find is that the traditions of African woman inferiority will also be a dominant factor in the politics of that organization. So in order to counter that, we have to struggle against the notion, even in our own party, even in that sometimes African men have with them, that is a consequence of living in this white-dominated system that is based on the false assumption of supremacy of men over women, that we have to wage that struggle. That's part of an ideological and political struggle that has to be embraced by our entire movement and our entire community. That, in fact, part of the call for African women to be brought into the Revolutionary Project is a part of the struggle for the equality of African women and men existing inside our community, something that is not easily accepted. So that's one thing. Another aspect of that is the churches, and that's where African women are in the churches. And I think that there may be some truth to that, but I think one thing we learned a long time ago as organizers, that it's really important to try, when possible, to do some work within these churches. But the fundamental thing we've found is to organize the congregation, to win the congregation to this politics. And the congregation live in our communities, and they are the ones, not the preachers' children so much, but the children of the congregation are the ones who are catching hell in the schools, being faced with police terror and this kind of thing. And so if we want to turn the church around, we say that while we might do work with the church, and the main task is to take on the issues that are important to the congregation of that church, and through that win the ability to turn the preachers in the church around as well. So these sisters, if you look at the kinds of attacks happening to African women, for example, Kunde Mwamvita, when her children were killed, I think the church might have been supportive. I think they may have been supportive, but consistently who has been able to work with her has been the revolutionary movement, the Revolutionary Project, and other women see that. There are women who do work in various other places around the country who've seen, who watched us from various other places around the country, have seen the approach we've taken to Kunde Mwamvita and her murdered daughter, and through that, they have come to understand that there is a place, certainly in the party, in the Revolutionary Project. And somebody has commented on, like 20 years after the assassination of Tyrone Lewis here in St. Petersburg, Florida, we still waging that struggle. So this helps, this is part of what's helped African women, whether they're in the church or not, to recognize there's a place here. We've got our own choirs we are developing, women-led choir in the Uhuru movement. And I think that if we address these critical questions of children being kidnapped, I don't know any churches in our community that's dealing with the fact that these agencies are stealing out the children from African women. That's the approach to get women, not just going to the church and saying we love women, but going to these agencies, stealing babies and waging struggle. And this is how African women can identify what their real interests are in the real world. So that's the response I would give to that quickly. Uhuru. Is there anyone else?
Yes, just one please. Jim.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciated the talk on dealing in the mass organization. But what we did an event just yesterday, and the children.
Where's here? Where are you? Where are you? You said we did an event here. Where?
Here in Houston.
Okay, Houston, Texas. Go ahead.
Maybe 35 or so people came out, but it was an African Mother's Day thing. But in effect, what it did was show the importance of the mass organizations. If you go build a party, then you build a mass organization. Because people are really appreciative of not only out there, but NPR was not mentioned in your report here, but NPR too. And you know, I just consistently point out, you point out, brother, that this is the job of cadres to build these mass organizations. And if we do that, we build a party too.
Yeah, Uhuru. Uhuru. Thank you, comrade. That's right on. Anybody else?
Yeah, a question.
I have a question online. Go ahead.
From his name is Andre Perez. It says, "Aloha, I am a Hawaiian sovereignty and independence organizer. Do you ever have any training workshops around organizing, movement building, liberation leadership, analyst development, direct action, etc.? If you did, I would fly over from Hawaii."
This is Andre Perez from Hawaii, and he's a part of the independence movement in Hawaii. Is that right?
Hawaiian sovereignty and independence.
Splendid. Yeah, we had with comrades from Hawaii at a meeting in Russia a year or so ago, and I was glad to see the issue of Hawaiian independence reintroduced, because it was just, you have to how the USS took Hawaii. It blows your mind, because the U.S. came and took Hawaii, just took it, you know, just some white business people who were involved in sugar plantations and stuff like that. They just took it, right, and overthrew the Queen, rewrote the Constitution, and enforced it just took it. So, and you have